Emily Thornberry is here for us for Labour this morning. What do you make of what should happen to Shamima Begum?
Well, there's a judicial process going on. We will hear from the courts at 10 o'clock. And I just hope that whatever decision is made, we can now put this matter behind us and move on.
We can't influence the judge, of course, though, can we? So
No,
what's your view?
Well, I personally think that the priority for me would have always been the children. You know, these women go out to Syria and they've had children. They were British citizens at the time. They've had children. These children are now stateless. And the international community does need to work out what the future of these clearly innocent children are going to be. That would have always been my priority. I also think, if it had been me, I think that I probably would have wanted to bring Shamima Begum back to Britain so that she could face charges for the offences that she's clearly committed.
Mm-hmm. The then Home Secretary, Sajid Javid, recently said if we knew what he knew, she should never be allowed back in this country because she is a risk. Surely, I don't know, can we not push, if that is the case, can she not be tried and put in jail if that proves to be the case?
Well, that's what I've said. I mean, I think that you know, on the face of it, she's clearly committed offences. I think she should have been brought back here and face justice. But you know, the government has taken another course and they've decided to strip her of her British nationality. And as far as I can see, although I think she can claim Bangladeshi citizenship, she is effectively largely stateless in a refugee settlement. But as I say, more important than her is other children, are the children of these women and what's going to happen to them.
I believe if she did go to Bangladesh, she would face the death penalty. But again, that's speculation at this stage. Talk to me about the Northern Ireland protocol. What are we going to do to sort out... Where's the border going to go? I know that Labour say they will support the government, whatever. Where do you want to see the border?
Can I start, Kay, by just saying that when I first did Prime Minister's questions, the very first question I asked was what was going to happen if we left the European Union to the border between Northern Ireland and the rest of Europe. And, you know, if we left a customs union, how was that going to work? Because it isn't an easy answer. Right? And I didn't get an answer. And I think we're still struggling to find one. I think that clearly, you know, everybody watching this programme knows the background. You know, we had a Prime Minister who claimed he had an oven-ready deal. He said that he had a solution. He clearly didn't have a solution. It clearly doesn't work. And what's happened...
We're being told it was a temporary solution.
Oh, right, a temporary oven-ready solution. Right, well, if only he'd spelt that out. But instead, what we need to have is we need to find a permanent solution. It is difficult and it is holding up also the deal that we came to with the European Union, people will remember, was signed on Christmas Eve. It wasn't a complete deal. It needed to have further negotiation, not just on Northern Ireland, but actually there's a whole load of other things. We can see by the way that our trade has gone down with the rest of Europe that there are all kinds of hurdles that British business absolutely needs to get cleared out the way. And we can't do that without improving our relationship with the European Union. We can't do that without sorting out Northern Ireland. So we need to sort out Northern Ireland. Now, I know that Keir has been to Northern Ireland a number of times, spoken to business in Northern Ireland who have had a number of suggestions which they have been putting forward both to government and to the opposition. But our position is this. If it's a deal that's in the interests of our country, the Prime Minister can rely on us to support him. He doesn't have to negotiate with these headbangers in the Tory party who, I don't know what they want, but whatever they want is not in the country's interest. We need to come to a solution and the government can, if it's in the interest of the country, rely on us. So, you know, stop wasting your time negotiating with some of these people and just move on with a sensible group of people in Parliament who want to see our economy looked after and be able to walk into the future and leave this Brexit nightmare behind us.
Where does Labour want the border to be?
I think we need to be fairly fluid about it. I mean, I think that we can't have Northern Ireland cut off from the rest of the United Kingdom. That's contrary to the Good Friday Agreement. But equally, you know, in the Good Friday Agreement, there was to be a more fluid border between North and South. So, you know, this is a question of subtlety and proper negotiation, and not just catchphrases. And there needs to be, as I say, give and take on both sides, and a kind of subtlety that we are up for, and we are up for supporting the government on. And the reason the government is stumbling, I think, is because of the hardliners within their own party.
I'm still not sure where you think the border should be.
Well, I think there shouldn't be a border between Northern Ireland and the rest of the United Kingdom. I think that, you know, the United Kingdom includes Northern Ireland, but I think that there needs to be a softer border between Northern Ireland and the south of Ireland, because that is a very important part of the Good Friday Agreement.
So you do think the border should be a land border?
Well, there is a land border, but the point is in practice, how does it work? So in practice, how does it impinge on the lives of people living on either side of the border? It's very important for peace that that is as soft as possible and as discreet as possible, but clearly there will be a border.
I was speaking to Lord Hayne, who of course used to be a Labour Northern Ireland Secretary. He was suggesting that we should have red and green routes going into Northern Ireland across the Irish Sea.
I don't really understand what that means.
I was hoping you would explain.
I don't know what he's talking about. I mean, it'd be interesting. I mean, it's always interesting to hear what Peter says, but I don't know about that. Listen, we're not involved in these negotiations, right? I wish we were. If we had been involved in these negotiations...
You could be hugely influential because the Prime Minister might need to rely on you.
Listen, the Prime Minister knows that he can rely on us if he comes up with a solution which is in the interest of our country.
That's why I'm trying to find out what you think the solution is.
And we are saying that, you know, we understand through the we haven't been told officially, but through the winks and nudges, we understand that there is an agreement that has been come to, at least in outline. From what we understand of it, it sounds like it's the right way forward. He doesn't need to worry. He will get it through Parliament because we understand that there are a series of agreements that will be made so that, for example, there will be able to be items that won't need to be checked on the border, but there can be agreements in advance of knowing what items there are and whether they will be acceptable and they will be able to flow through more naturally. And how you get to those sorts of agreements is something that, as I say, is subject to the negotiation that's been going on. But with a softening of that border can happen, will happen, and we need to make sure that there's still some security there. But the fundamental security is to ensure that we continue to have peace in Ireland. That's the most important thing.
It's 25 years, I think, almost since the Northern Ireland Agreement was first signed.
Exactly. And we want to be able to celebrate that. We want to be able to celebrate that by having got this matter sorted out in advance of Good Friday. You know, we want to have the American president coming over and celebrating with us 25 years. And despite Britain leaving the European Union, because, of course, the Northern Irish Agreement was also based on the idea of everybody being in the European Union. So there needs to be a bit of give and take in relation to this. But where there's goodwill, there's a way.
Do you think the agreement will be this week?
I think it might be, but as I say, it depends whether he hears us when we say, don't worry about trying to get your headbangers to agree. You've got us.
How interesting. I almost forgot to ask you about crackdown on drugs. That's what you wanted to talk about today.
Well, I wanted to talk particularly, actually, about something which we discovered recently, and in answer to questions that I'd asked to the Attorney General, which is that the number of prosecutors in the Crown Prosecution Service has gone down by 25% in a year, which is really frightening. Because if we don't have enough prosecutors, then that simply is going to add to the backlog of cases within the courts. And the longer that cases go on, you know, before they actually get to be heard, the more likely they are to collapse, particularly cases like rape and particularly cases where you need to rely on witnesses in things like drugs cases. So we need to make... So when I found this out, we were amazed and wrote back and checked, but we understand these numbers are right. And because they can't attract people into the Crown Prosecution Service, and when they do, they can't keep them. So we've come up with a solution, which is that there are things called associate prosecutors, and they have a lot of experience and expertise in crime. And what we've said is, in a kind of all hands to the pump type way, let them do the job of full prosecutors, at least in the interim. I mean, we think probably in the long term, so that we can fill these gaps and we can really push on with getting criminal cases into the courts and dealt with quickly and properly, because the backlog in the courts is getting worse and worse. They've got targets for cutting it. They set up a target last year of cutting cases, I think, by 7,000. They've actually gone up. No. Our criminal justice system is in complete crisis, from not having enough police officers catching enough criminals to them being processed and being dealt with in the courts and then into the criminal justice system on the other side. No, and it's been overlooked for far too long, and there's a series of problems, but this one in particular I wanted to highlight today, which is that we've lost 25% of our prosecutors from the Crown Prosecution Service in a year.